shot face down.
The story begins in November 1974, with the appearance of a house known as Amityville. A man was sitting in the basement of that house, and a devilish voice told him to end them at 3:15 a.m. As that voice said, he picks up the gun and ends all his family. The police discover this and arrest him, but he says in his statement, "I heard few voices that night, and they made me do this." Afterward, we see a family in which there was a couple and 3 kids. In that couple, the wife was named Kathy, and they are her kids because this is her second husband. Now they have to buy a new house, so they go to a dealer, and she shows them the house we saw at the start. The house where the man ended his family named Amityville, and it was large and inexpensive, so they decided to buy it. Meanwhile, the dealer tells them about this house's past, that there have been many murderers. But hearing this, Kathy's husband George says, "What is the fault of the house in this? The house doesn't end anyone, but people do." They buy this house while thinking to live nicely with their family. After a few days, that family comes to live in that house, and Kathy goes to make her son sleep. Her son wasn't feeling sleepy because he was missing his real father, so he asks Kathy, "Will George love us like our real father?" To which she says, "Yes, why not? Just do friendship with him." But George also hears all this, so he decides to be a good father. Later, he moves to his room but feels cold, so he goes to the basement to turn the heater on. He sees a clock on which it was striking 3:15, and at the same time, he hears a few voices. He ignores those voices and moves upstairs, but George sees a girl's soul in his room when they were sleeping. She was hanged and badly injured, and this scares him. Kathy moves to her daughter's room but gets shocked to see that her daughter was talking to someone, so she asks, "With whom are you talking?" To which she says, "I am talking to Jody." She was actually the younger sister of that man, and he ended her in this room. Her soul was wandering in this room, visible only to Kathy's daughter. George was cutting wood when Kathy's son approaches him with an iron weapon and claims to have found it in the basement. George, on the other hand, becomes enraged because the basement is my office and contains my important documents, so if you go there again, it will not be good. The boy moves to his mother while weeping. After a while, they couldn't find their daughter, so they become worried. Meanwhile, they hear a dog barking in the boathouse, and they move there. The boathouse is actually a room near the stream where boats are kept. They see their daughter standing in the boat and about to jump into the water, but George stops her from doing this. Kathy asks, "What is she doing here alone?" She replies, "Jody is my friend, and I come here to show her my boathouse." Kathy feels weird hearing this, but she ignores and leaves with her daughter. After it, George leaves while locking the boathouse. Their younger son goes to the washroom at midnight, and he hears weird, terrible voices, and a soul is shown behind him when he was washing his hands. It looks terrible, and there is blood instead of water in the tap. The boy gets scared to see this. His condition gets worse, that's why he rushes back to his bed. Now, as it strikes 3:15 at night, all the windows of the house open automatically. George awakes, surprised, and he doesn't feel good. That's why he goes to the kid's room to check. There, he finds himself holding a gun in his hand and ends himself the next moment with a bullet. Meanwhile, George awakes, and we discover that this was just a dream of George. He sees the door of the boathouse open, even though he locked it, and he feels that maybe Kathy's daughter went there again. He immediately goes to check, but the girl isn't there, and his dog starts barking. George feels that maybe she has jumped in the water, so he also jumps. He doesn't find her anywhere, and coming out of the water, he sees Kathy's daughter looking at him through her room's window. There is a soul of a stranger girl behind her. He panics to see this and moves to her room, but he becomes astonished to see Kathy's daughter sound asleep. The next day, George goes to the basement and sees his dog digging behind the wall. He understands there is something. Meanwhile, Kathy arrives and asks, "Are you fine?" But George says, "I can't sleep properly, and I am not in a good mood," and also becomes furious at Kathy. She feels strange seeing his changing behavior. When she is alone in the kitchen, a shadow passes behind her, and she feels someone pass from there. But when she looks at the fridge, it is written in alphabets, "Catch them and kill them." Seeing this, she feels maybe George had done this, and when she moves to ask him, the alphabets return to their original positions. Kathy thinks it may be my delusion. They are going to dinner at night and they called a babysitter to take care of the kids. The kids like her. After her arrival, Kathy is about to take her to show the whole house, but she refuses. She says, "I have done a babysitter job here before. I took care of the kids of the family who lived here." Later, George and Kathy go to a hotel where they spend quality time. On the other side, the babysitter is telling Kathy's son about the house. The owner of the house, Jody's brother, heard voices from this house that asked him to end his family. Firstly, he ended his dog, and later, all his family because he believed that they were all devils. After telling this, she goes to the room of Kathy's daughter and tells her that this was the room of a girl named Jody. She was killed by her brother, and later, her dead body was found in the cupboard. Kathy's daughter says that Jody told me that you were a bad babysitter, but the babysitter says, she is dead, so how could she say this? The girl doesn't reply to it. Kathy's son challenges her to go to that cupboard, but as the babysitter goes inside, Jody's soul scares her. The soul is injured, as there is a bullet mark on her forehead. She pushes her finger into her wound, and this frightens the babysitter. Her condition worsens, and she falls into deep trauma. Seeing her condition, the kids call an ambulance. Meanwhile, George and Kathy return and are shocked to see the condition of the babysitter. She tells Kathy that she saw Jody in the house, and Kathy understands that her daughter also mentioned this name. It means there is something in the house, but George says maybe the kids were just playing a prank on her. He scolds them, but Kathy goes to her daughter and asks what happened when we left. Her daughter tells her that Jody scared the babysitter because she doesn't like her. And, "Mother, let me tell you one more thing," Jody says. George is also not a good human. The next day, George is cutting wood and seems furious. He asks Kathy's son to stack all the cut wood. There is a lot of wood, so the night falls and Kathy's son becomes tired. Kathy is angry with him because of his behavior. George hears Kathy's kids' voices from the basement, and they are insulting him. Along with it, he hears a terrible, devilish voice asking George to end them. He panics upon hearing that voice. He moves behind the wall and sees a long ditch of blood. Moving forward, he sees himself soaked in blood. Upon seeing it, George wakes up in shock, and we discover that it was just a dream. Afterward, he goes to the washroom to take a shower, but while bathing, a soul tries to drown him in the water. He gets scared and tries to escape, but Kathy comes and saves him. Then, the next day, she takes him to the doctor for a checkup. The doctor prescribes a few tests, but their reports come back normal, which means George is normal. Even so, if they want to, they can visit a famous psychiatrist. They are shocked when they reach home and see their daughter standing on the roof, moving toward the stream. They panic and immediately rush to save her. Kathy asks, "What are you doing here? Where are you heading to?" Her daughter replies, "Jody asked me to go with her, and she will make me meet my father," and jumps. George catches her before she falls into the water, saving her. Now, because of this, Kathy becomes furious with her. George feels that their actions are strange. He calls them mad and moves to the basement with his luggage to live there. Afterward, Kathy goes to a priest and tells him that everything is happening weirdly because there is an evil power in her house. Her house is in chaos because of it. The priest becomes worried upon hearing this and says, "I had a similar case a year ago." Kathy asks, "Was it the case of the man who killed his family, including a girl named Jody?" The priest says yes, but how do you know all this? Kathy replies, because we are living in their house right now. George's behavior has changed in the house. He beats Kathy's son and warns him. Then he moves to the basement and starts watching a video of his family, in which he sees Kathy's son depicted as a devil. He becomes astonished to see this, but he falls asleep after a while. Then he wakes up right at 3:15 in the night, and he again hears the devilish voice saying, "Kill them." Along with it, all the doors of the house open automatically. George moves to the boathouse with an axe, and upon reaching the boathouse, a soul attacks him. To escape, he attacks the soul with the axe and ends it. But when he comes to his senses, he doesn't find any soul there. He had ended his dog. The next day, Kathy says, "We have to leave this house. It's haunted." George refuses to leave the house, and they argue about it. Meanwhile, their kids arrive and tell their mother that the dog is missing. They think George has made the dog disappear or has killed it, so they ask him about it. Now, a father visits their home at noon and sees a black teddy bear in Kathy's daughter's hands. He tells Kathy that it is Jody's teddy bear. But surprisingly, it was buried with her in the coffin, so how did your daughter get it? Saying this, the father moves inside the house and sprinkles holy water everywhere. The water disappears as it falls, and a swarm of flies attacks the father the next moment. He also hears a devilish voice asking him to escape from there, and the father does the same. George wakes up again at night, and the devilish voice once again asks him to end everyone. The echoing voices in his brain are terrible, and he is in pain, so he goes outside and lies down there to avoid them. Kathy has also noticed his condition, so she goes to the library the next day and starts reading the newspaper, which contains information about the house. She discovers that Jody's brother seemed possessed by an evil entity. That's why he killed his family after 28 days. She also finds a book mentioned in the newspaper. It is about a cruel magician who built the house in 1671 and performed various devilish magic on people. He would oppress them and then sacrifice them to the devil. One day, the magician sacrificed himself, ensuring that his soul would be imprisoned in the house forever. Realizing this, Kathy discovers that the magician's soul is in the house, making George do all these things. The voices continue to torment George, so he breaks down the basement door and goes inside. He sees a prison cell where the magician used to perform magic on people and sacrifice them after oppressing them. Moving forward, he also sees the magician himself, who cuts his neck in front of him, and his blood falls on George. This possession by the magician transforms him into a devil. Later, Kathy goes to the father's house and asks him why he ran from their house. The father tells her that there is a terrible and powerful soul in their house, and he couldn't fight it, so he ran away. Kathy returns home and sees George in a strange condition in the boathouse. He also tries to attack Kathy to harm her, but she manages to escape from there. Kathy's daughter sees coffins with the names of her family members when she goes to the basement. She gets scared to see them and shows them to Kathy. Afterward, they decide to leave the house. Now, the possessed George is searching for his family with a gun, and the soul of the magician helps him by shutting all the doors and windows of the house so they couldn't escape. They manage to break a window and move to the roof of the house, but George is chasing them. Kathy's son hits him with a rod, causing him to fall down and faint. They come down and attempt to escape. Meanwhile, George regains consciousness and stabs Kathy with an axe, but she somehow picks up the gun and attacks George, making him faint. They then tie George up and place him in the boat before leaving. After a while, George wakes up and urges Kathy to leave as soon as possible and not to stop. The screen displays that it has been 28 days since the family started living in the house, but they left and never returned. Later, Jody's soul is shown being suddenly pulled into the basement by the magician's soul. Along with it, the house returns to its normal condition, indicating that any family that comes to the house will become prey to the magician. Another family will come after their death, and the cycle continues. The magician will end everyone and make them his prey, continuously sacrificing them to the devil. In reality, he has become a devil, and this house is haunted by him because he worships the devil and sacrifices people to satisfy him. One day, he sacrificed himself to remain in the house as a soul forever. He possesses the men of the house and forces them to end their families, gaining power in the process. He desires to rule the house, and this is where the true story concludes.
Make sure you subscribe and turn on notification to watch more videos like this and show us support for our effort. Take care.